I went into this movie ready to hate because I ain't want to see my girl Zendaya getting tongued down by another man. But even I can't hate on this. I'm gonna let you know right now, this movie is getting a high rating. We talking spoilers, by the way. Dune Part 2 is a movie that I've been looking forward to for a while now, but if you remember, this movie was supposed to come out last year, but it got delayed because of all the strikes going on in Hollywood. I'm gonna be completely honest with you, when it comes to the lore and the history of this story, I don't know anything. This review is based strictly on what I just witnessed. I never read the books. I ain't even know what Dune was until the first movie came out a few years ago. I went into this movie just wanting to see a good film, and we might have got an instant classic. And real quick, my thoughts on the first movie, because I just saw this for the first time like 2-3 days ago on Netflix. If I had to give the first movie a rating, I would probably give it a 7. I thought the first hour of the film was really boring, and story-wise, I had no idea what was going on, but once the story started to pick up, I thought it got pretty interesting. Even though my girl Zendaya, she was on all the posters, she was doing all the marketing, she was in all these interviews, and she was only in the movie for like 5 minutes, and then half that time, she was moving in slow motion. When I saw the trailer for Dune Part 2, this movie looked bigger, it looked more action-packed. This movie is 2 hours and 40 minutes long, and I wish it was even longer because it seemed to really fly by. But I'm saying that in a good way. Obviously, this movie has a star-studded cast with Timothée Chalamet, Zendaya, Rebecca Ferguson, Florence Pugh, Austin Butler, Thanos. I could go on and on, but everyone in this movie delivered for the most part. But I'll talk about that in a second. Now, once again, I haven't read the book, so I can't tell you what's different. I don't know what changes were made. I did see some people online that read the books, they were complaining about some of the changes. But for me, as a guy that just walked in, wanted to see a good movie, and I don't really know what's going on, I don't really have any complaints. The complaints that I do have, to me, they are very minor. But first, let's start with the writing. And while I do have some complaints, I'm going to save my complaints for later in this video. Overall, this story is top notch. And for this trend of movies being 2.5 hours long, it could be pretty hit or miss. Nothing is worse than being in a movie theater for a long ass movie that you don't like. This grabbed my attention from the opening scene with Paul and the other Freemen in the sand, and they quickly took out this group of enemy soldiers. This movie starts off pretty brutal. Like, you see these enemy soldiers and they're flying to the top of this mountain, and then you see them get killed one by one and their bodies just come crashing down to the ground, and then we get to see the process of the water being extracted from their body, which just the thought of is disgusting. Start to finish, you just want to see what's coming next. So many layers and threads to this story. Lady Jessica seems like such a bitch. This man Paul is basically Jesus. You got Messiah talk and conflict between believers and non-believers. It's a lot going on. This journey we go on with Paul as he learns the way of the freemen and gaining their respect. His mom going down south to gain power and rally up a bunch of believers in this prophecy. Paul not wanting to go south because all he sees is war and death. You get such a beautiful written story, and I'm kind of jumping around because this review could easily be like 30 minutes long. I was already enjoying this movie, but once Paul actually went down south, it just went to a whole nother level. That scene after he drank the blue liquid and then he went to that temple with all the leaders or whatever, and he was like, yo, I'm the Messiah. We can scrap, what we doing? He was talking to those people so crazy. Like, that whole sequence, that whole scene, 10 out of 10. In the first movie, I didn't really think anything of Timothy's performance. Like, he wasn't bad, he was just cool. But in part 2, he killed this entire movie, and that scene where he's basically telling them, I'm the Messiah, that completely changed the way I look at him as an actor. Then at the end of the movie, after he kills Elvis, he turns to Zendaya and tells her he's gonna love her until the day he stops breathing. And then my man Paul keeps it player, and then he turns to this other baddie, Florence Pugh, and tell her we gonna rule the galaxy together. The look that Zendaya gave that camera, bruh. The writing in this movie is incredible, but once again, I haven't read the book, so I can't really compare, and I don't care. Now let's talk about the cinematography and production, because I really want to give this guy credit. Greg Fraser, I hope I pronounced that right. The production and the way this movie was shot should 1000% be considered for the Oscars next year. Greg was the director of cinematography on The Batman, one of my favorite movies in the last few years. He also did cinematography on The Creator, which came out last year, and even though I didn't like the movie, the visuals for that were amazing. There was so many breathtaking moments in this movie, and I also want to give credit, obviously, to the director, Denis Villeneuve. Pretty sure I said that wrong. The scene of Paul riding a sandworm, Batista and his group getting taken out with stealth attacks, Zendaya completely obliterating a man with a rocket launcher, and the black and white portion of the film may be my favorite. The fact that the lighting for that scene was because of the sun on that planet, and it looked so cool. They had fireworks that kind of looked like ink droplets. It was so many cool moments towards the end of the movie. Like, you had one scene where Paul was walking down the sand, and then you just see a wave of soldiers running from behind him, and then it was another scene where Paul and his troops blew down the door where the emperor was having his meeting. You see the emperor's guards walk into this cloud of smoke, and then they just quietly disappear, and you can see the outline of Paul and his people, and they just walk through like nothing happened. I said the same thing during my John Wick 4 review. It was so many moments during this movie where I sat there and I was just thinking to myself, this might be the greatest thing I've ever seen. It was so many scenes where I kept telling myself, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. I saw this in IMAX, and the way that I feel about this wasn't a movie, this was an experience. Even though I do love this movie, I do have some complaints, but to me, they're pretty minor. I'm sure they go into more details in the book, but the love between Zendaya and Timothy's character felt really rushed to me. But maybe I'm just being jealous. It seems like her character was like, I don't trust you, and now we're banging. Another issue that I had is I feel like Dave Bautista and Austin Butler's characters were kind of wasted. Like, I feel bad for Bautista because between two movies, in the span of 6 hours, his character doesn't do like that scene where Batista and his troops end up getting attacked and he ends up running. That scene was pretty cool, but he looks like a coward. Like, even when he dies, Josh Brolin literally just walks up to him and stabs him in the neck. No type of back and forth. And Austin Butler's character also doesn't really do anything. I thought he was going to be cool. We get this crazy guy who's a great fighter. And again, I feel like they could have done more. I feel like they could have showed he was a great fighter in the gladiator scene. He beat 2 drugged up fighters and a random guy. He kills 2 innocent women in his bedroom and then another woman with a flamethrower. The fight at the end of the movie would have been even better if we saw he was a great fighter instead of being told. And for my last thing, it pains me to say this, I did not like Christopher Walken in this. And that's my guy, I'm a big fan of his. His appearance just felt odd to me. Like, he felt more like a special guest than a legit character, if that makes sense. Like, they were kind of like, hey, look who we got. But even with those complaints, pretty minor. As of this recording, the movie is projected to make $80 million in the US and $180 million around the globe for its opening weekend. On Rotten Tomatoes, it has a critic score of 94% and a fan rating of 95%. And I'm right there with them, but I'm gonna go even higher. I'm gonna give this movie a motherfucking 10. And this is coming from a guy that usually hates everything. Everything about this movie was great. The acting was great, the cinematography was great, the story was great, the costume design was great, the action was great, Zendaya looked great. It's not really much to complain about. And once again, I haven't read the book, so this review is based strictly on what I just saw, but if the books are a more detailed version of this, I might need to go buy that. I cannot recommend this movie enough. I hit up my friends, I hit up my family. I told them, if you're on the fence and you don't know if you really want to see this, I'll go with you. For the last 30 or so minutes of this movie, I was really sitting back in my seat like, damn, this must be what Martin Scorsese was talking about. I started this YouTube channel in February of last year, and this is only the second movie that I've given a 10 to. I don't really have a lot to complain about. I'm sure I could find other things to complain about, but it wouldn't be anything that ruins the movie for me. The only other film that I gave a 10 to on this channel to is from some guy named Christopher Nolan. You might have heard of the movie. It's called Oppenheimer. I saw that in IMAX like 5-6 times, no lie. Dune, Oppenheimer, completely different vibes. Both amazing pieces of work. But thank you guys for watching. Like, subscribe if you're new here. We talk about a bunch of different things on this channel. What are your thoughts on this movie? I haven't seen too many bad reviews for this, but I also don't know who's read the book, who hasn't read the book. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Love you guys. Tell someone you love them. Till next time, see you in the next life.